I wanted to make a video about how I train. So my basic philosophy features, it's a priority-based training regimen. So, dependent on what you need to work on, depending on what your specific goals are. I do mostly bodybuilding or physique-based training with people. So, and obviously with myself, the focus is always more about physique development. But I do want to perform well, be strong, prevent injuries, all of those things. Fortunately, symmetry and injury prevention kind of go hand in hand, so that actually works out pretty well with that. And then progressive overload. So I don't do a program progressive overload, so I'm not like having you do a 1 rep max or a 3 rep max, calculating, percentages, and then having like these targets that you're hitting this weight for these reps, that sort of thing. The way I do it is more, you do 2 to 3 sets of 6 to 12 repetitions, and it would be programmed, right? So I'll program it. If I'm writing myself a program, I stay mostly in the 8 to 10 range. Sometimes I'll go down to 6, sometimes I'll go up to 12, but mostly in that 8 to 10 range. So let's say it's, squats, 3 sets of 8. And then when I can hit all 3 sets for all 8 reps at whatever the given weight is, then I progress the weight. So I'll move the weight up to, let's say I did 315 for 3 sets of 8, and I get all 3 sets for all 8 reps, and I would move the weight and progress that to 320 or 325. I usually recommend doing relatively small intervals, or increases rather, increments. That's what I was looking for. Relatively small increments. But certainly as the weights are getting heavier, it's not always a bad thing, especially if you're doing like say a 10 to 12 rep range, and let's say you're doing 300 to 400 pounds for 10 to 12 reps for multiple sets. Jumping, throwing 5s on each side instead of 2.5s on each side, I don't think is that big of a deal, especially when you consider that, when you're doing like a barbell curl, you can't, well, I guess you could go buy, 1.25 pound weights, but most gyms aren't going to have anything less than 2.5, so that relative weight increase when you throw the 2.5s on your barbell curl is still going to be more than the relative weight increase when you throw 5s on, a squat or a deadlift. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. Now, on those heavier movements, sometimes I'll do like a force progression. So if I notice that, let's say I'm doing deadlifts for 4 sets of 10 and I'm at 455 pounds, and after like 5 or 6 weeks, I still can't get my last set of 10. So I get 10, 10, and let's say I keep on falling at like 8 or 9 reps, and I can't get all 10 on that last set. And it's been more than a month. Not always, but occasionally what I'll do with that is kind of a force progression where I'll just add a little bit of weight. When I do something like that, I always do the smallest increment possible. So with that, even if it's 455, we're only jumping up to 460. But I just do that to make sure that I'm trying to, I guess, force progression. So I'll be honest, for myself, having been doing this for so long, I don't always program for myself. I did pretty religiously for a long time, and I fell off, a bit over the years with some of the different colitis flare-ups. Sometimes it was just wanting to have fun in the gym again, and other times it was I just trained for so many competitions and everything had been so regimented. I wanted to do something different. When I started up my store, that was another time, probably for about a year. My time to work out in that first year, because I was spending so much time at the store, plus my commute, and then still trying to do chores around the house, make food, go grocery shopping, etc., etc. I was limited to probably about 45 minutes a day in the gym for the most part. So what I was trying to do is just a lot of circuit training, and with doing a lot of circuit training, I wasn't really logging anything I was doing. I was just going in, knowing what body parts I was going to hit that day, and then just having fun, just kind of off the cuff, whatever I felt like, trying to break sweat, lift a little bit of weight, have fun. But for the sake of programming and trying to push for progress, one, I do believe that you're always going to get a little bit better progress when you program, and when you actually log your workouts, track everything. If you know that last week you did 3 sets of 8 on bench press at 135 pounds, and you got 8, 8, 7, so you didn't get all 8 on your last set, but you were close. I feel like you're more prone to giving that little extra effort to make sure you get all 8 this week. It's just little things like that. When you see it on paper, when you know it, when you're logging it, versus just making mental notes, I feel like there's just a little extra drive behind the workout. So I do encourage that, although, like I said, I don't always do it for myself. I am right now. It goes in waves for me. I'm probably maybe 75% of the year at this point. I actually program and log my workouts, and then the other 25% of the year I just go in, wing it, lift some heavy weight, have fun, do some circuits, all that kind of stuff. What else do I have here? Oh, so I also, if you're trying to grow a muscle group, whether you're trying to get it bigger, trying to get it stronger, I always say you have to train that muscle group more than once per week. Now, certainly when you're doing very heavy lifting, like less than 5 repetitions, so focusing on kind of more like the powerlifting style training, those lower repetitions are a much higher load on your central nervous system. That can take a lot longer to recover from, but it takes your CNS a long time to recover. It doesn't take your muscles a long time to recover. So you can still train those muscle groups again. I just wouldn't recommend doing like a 4x3 or a 6x3 or anything like that on a big compound movement multiple times per week. If you do that once in a week, the next time I would do a little bit higher rep range, or maybe a submaximal focusing on like speed or things like that. But still, if you're trying to progress, you have to hit that muscle group more than once a week. Training once a week is great for maintenance. Muscle atrophy starts as soon as 7 days. So if you don't train a muscle group for a week, so if you're training a muscle group less than once a week, you can actually start to experience muscle atrophy. Now, of course, that is usually like when you're just being sedentary. And it's as soon as, it's not necessarily going to happen like that. Also, if you're like, you do squats one day and deadlifts another day, there's a lot of similar muscles that are being trained there. So it's not quite so straightforward, but generally speaking, if you're trying to grow, you want to train a muscle group more than once a week. I personally like to focus more on volume for the week and not volume for the day. So I always program either a 2 or a 3-day split. Now what I mean by that is over the course of either 2 days, I hit every muscle group, or over the course of 3 days, I hit every muscle group. And then I will program for myself, I will always program 6 days of training. So that means that I'm hitting everything either 2 days a week or 3 days a week. I usually lean toward a 2-day split, which has me hitting every body part 3 days a week. But I don't increase the volume per day. So the volume per workout usually sits right around 30 sets, which means that the volume, hitting more muscle groups per day, the volume per muscle group each day is going to be less, but the volume for the muscle group over the course of the week will be relatively unchanged, or sometimes even slightly higher. So for example, like biceps and triceps, I usually would do 2, sometimes 3 movements for it, but a lot of times I might only do 2. For me personally, I would usually be more inclined to do 3 movements for biceps and then maybe only 3 for chest if I were doing chest and biceps in the same day, because I don't feel like my chest needs as much work as, relatively speaking, as my biceps do. My arms, shoulders, and back are my weak points. My chest and legs are my strong points. So I'm usually more inclined to do less movements for chest and legs to give myself a little bit more room for some more volume on the muscle groups that I feel need more work. But typically speaking, for most people, unless you really needed work on your arms, I wouldn't program more than about 2 movements per day in a 2-day split for biceps or for triceps. So let's say a real generic split where we did biceps, chest, and back, and then triceps, shoulders, and legs. Not necessarily in those orders, but on those days, for biceps on the first day, it would be probably just 2 movements, and then 3 to 4 movements for chest, and probably 4, maybe even 5 if I only did 3 for chest, 4 or 5 movements for back. Back has a lot of angles. I like to throw in a little bit more volume there when possible. Not always necessary, but I do feel like, especially if you have a lot of like cool machines that hit different angles, you can sometimes get a little bit, not every day, but a couple days, 1 or 2 days a week, get a little extra out of that little more volume. And then for the other day, probably again 2 movements for triceps, and then let's say shoulders would be 3 to 4 movements, and then probably 4, maybe 5 movements for legs. Again, that would depend a little bit on your priorities, what you needed to work on. But the general concept is about 10 movements per day, averaging usually about 3 sets each, so about 30 sets per day. Now, what that actually breaks down to on the week, though, is you're getting, six sets of biceps, 6 sets of triceps, but every other day. So 18 sets on biceps, 18 sets on triceps. If you're doing, let's just say, to make the math easy, if you're doing 4 movements for each of those other 4 muscle groups at 3 sets each, so that's 12 sets for chest, 12 sets for back, 12 sets for shoulders, 12 sets for legs, all of that 3 times a week. So that's going to be 36 sets for each of those other muscle groups weekly. And now, yes, when I program, I break the muscle groups up in legs, back, chest, shoulders. I do traps usually with shoulders, biceps, triceps. I do it that way just because I feel like from a symmetry standpoint, it's easiest for me to look at. Also, with your legs, there's so many phenomenal, like just big compound movements that hit most aspects of your legs. And, with back, I feel like there's so many little intricate muscles that, like particularly for the sake of bodybuilding, that you really want to hone in on to get all of those details to pop, to kind of bring every element of your back out. And it just, from my experience, seems like it does not grow as easily either. If you just do heavy rows and a bunch of lat pull downs, you're not going to get the same kind of growth in your back, from my experience, if that's all you're doing, as you would if you just do heavy squats, deadlifts, and lunges. If every day you work out, you did squat, deadlift, lunge, and that was all you did, you'd probably still have pretty darn good legs. Whereas with back, I feel like a little bit more volume, relative, I guess, to the muscle mass seems to be beneficial. Again, this is just based on my experience for myself and the people I've worked with. I'm not referencing or citing anything. There are some NASA studies on the muscle recovery for anybody who's questioning and muscle atrophy. You can look that up. I'm not gonna. This is me talking about how I train and how I work with people. Just kind of my thoughts on it. I didn't want it to be so in depth as to trying to go out of my way to provide a whole bunch of sources and resources, because I don't know. I guess I know that when I watch a video, a lot of times I don't take the time to even look into anything that they offer. What I might do is go delve into it on my own if I were interested, or I just take it at face value. So, anywho, so that's kind of the basics of how I program, how I train. I know this is super vague. Real quick, another thing I forgot to address. The way I set up priorities, so like within the workouts, are across and down. So if you have, we'll do a 2-day split again to make it easy. So day 1 in order would be priority numbers 1, 3, and 5, and then day 2 in order would be priority numbers 2, 4, and 6. So your priorities would kind of be, going across the day. So if it were a 3-day split, then it would be priorities 1 and 4 on day 1, priorities 2 and 5 on day 2, and priorities 3 and 6 on day 3. I don't really like doing a 4-day split. I feel like maybe more if you're trying to just let your body rest a little bit, but you still want to get into the gym, that might be a good idea. Like hitting everything once a week over the course of 4 days, having 3 days off. I don't consider that I don't know if that's more of a maintenance program or a recovery program, and I don't really program for that. Usually for maintenance or recovery, what I actually do is I just tell people, like, have fun for the next week. Like after a competition or something, like get a few workouts in, have some fun, do what you want, get a pump, don't go nuts. That's my recovery recommendations. Because part of it for me is the recovery should be mental, not just physical. And if you're going in there and still following a super regimented program, it's just a week or two. it's, in my mind at least, it just seems like you're not getting the mental relief or release of just kind of not worrying about having to follow a program, and maybe being able to do a few of the things that you wouldn't otherwise do because they're not really beneficial to what your goals are, but you think they're fun. So anyway, that's that. One more thing I wanted to touch on, and this is something that I feel like I get the most pushback on with people. I feel like my general training philosophy is pretty simple, pretty straightforward. I think a lot of people can kind of get on board with it. It works, it's effective. I've never worked with anybody who hasn't had great results doing it. That will also apply to what I'm about to say for what I like to do for the last 4 to 6 weeks before a competition, and that is I love doing 2-a-day workouts. And that's not like a lifting session and a cardio session. Now, I'm not even going to claim that this is my original idea. I was reading Arnold Schwarzenegger's autobiography when I was in college, and I was getting ready for a guest posing that I was going to be doing at Greek Physique, which was our annual bodybuilding competition that my school held. And he talked about how that was how he set up his workouts, is he trained he trained twice a day. Now, his workouts were 2 workouts a day for 2 hours each. It was all lifting. I knew that there was no way that my body could handle that, or at least not with any sort of output. I figured, he was having a couple extra supplements, let's say, that I wasn't as a college kid. So I designed workouts that were about 45 minutes each, as long as I stayed on task, but 2 a day. And so I stuck with my 2-day split, so hitting everything 3 times a week, and then hit about usually 6 to 7 movements in the morning, and then evening would be about another 7, maybe 8. Basically, I was looking at usually 13 to 15 total movements in a day, or around 40 to 45 sets per day. So it was, 33 to 50% increase in volume from my normal workouts, but split up over 2 workouts. Now, the first reason I liked this was because the first time I ever tried it, I got stronger while I got leaner. It was my first time ever getting ready for something where I was leaning out more easily than I ever had while eating more food and gaining strength. I'd never experienced that before. It was awesome. I loved it. The second reason that I liked it was I started having other people try it, just kind of recommendation, because it worked for me. It kept working for me, and it kept working for other people that I had do it. And what we all noticed was when you're in a caloric deficit, whether it's induced by exercise or induced through diet, the mental energy is one of the things that fades. And certainly, the being a little bit more depleted, or in the lower calorie ranges, particularly if like your carbohydrates are lower, it can be harder to always have the physical energy in the gym. But the mental energy fades as well. And so a lot of times if you're going in there and you're trying to be, training for weightlifting for hour and 10 to hour and 20 minutes, it's really hard mentally, right? Even an hour is kind of hard sometimes. But these workouts that were about 40 minutes long, it seemed like everybody, myself included, but me first, but then everybody else that I kind of had try this, seemed to feel that it was just a lot easier mentally. Now, not everybody's a fan of it, and that's fine. I'm not saying that you have to love it. I'm not saying you have to like it. I'm not even saying you have to agree with me. What I am saying is that in my experience, it works phenomenally, particularly, now I haven't actually done it too often. I've had a couple guys that I've worked with who use PEDs who did have great success with it, but I haven't had many people who use PEDs try it. I would imagine, if anything, you would respond better with PEDs because your recovery should be improved. But I haven't had a whole lot of people who've wanted to try it. The guys who did, had unbelievable results. But for everybody that I've ever worked with naturally, and for all of my years of competing naturally, nothing compared to it. I 100% of the time in all my years competing got stronger. Usually my weight would be coming down, and then it'd start coming back up for a few weeks before it then started tapering back down. So I might start off, 6 weeks out, and I'd be in pretty good shape around 202 to 203 pounds. And then at like 3 to 4 weeks out, I would actually be more like 204. So my weight would be coming down a little bit, then it'd come back up, and then it would kind of taper back down to about 200 by the show. And by the show, I felt like I always looked like I dropped about 4 to 5% body fat from that 203. But, based on weight, I couldn't have dropped more than about 2. But, just whatever it was, I'd imagine there's increased nitrogen retention and all sorts of things that were happening from all the weightlifting. But it was always a great response. It was very effective at maintaining, if not gaining, strength and muscle mass while, burning the extra calories, getting leaner, and then also being able to, diet into the competition with a little bit higher caloric intake and not just having to starve yourself to get there. Which for me, I like to eat. I'm hungry all the time. That also worked better for me, mentally. So that's my experience. That's my opinion. I am a fan of it. I do feel that that works better than anything else I've ever done for myself as well as for other people I've worked with. I always tell people that I do work with, like, it isn't necessary. But if you're willing, I guess, to put in that time, if you have the free time to do it, or if you have the desire to kind of, leave no stone unturned, I do personally believe that it will net a better result than not. And I mean, everybody, at least so far that I've worked with, has seemed to have had better experiences doing that than not. I'm sure that there's some people I've worked with over the years who'd want to argue with me on it because it's hard. It's very hard work. It's exhausting. Obviously, that's kind of one of the reasons we came up with Grit Nutrition as a name for the store we opened up, was because I'm a big believer in hard work. But yeah, anyway, I don't mean to keep rambling. I do this a lot. Just kind of go on and on, but that's my basics in terms of how I like to train, as well as the little bit of a variation that I like to put on things when I'm getting ready for a competition. One last thing that I didn't mention in terms of cardio. I don't use cardio in the off season or for competitions for weight loss. I don't use it for the excess calorie burn. I use cardio to improve my cardiovascular health and my cardiovascular ability. I use cardio so that way I have more stamina when I'm lifting weights. I use cardio so that I'm healthier and feel better and, just a healthy, well-balanced human. I think cardio is phenomenal for health. But I don't think it's at all necessary for weight loss or for having a great physique. I think there's a lot of ways between diet and weightlifting to be able to look great, to be able to lose weight. I mean, the diet's going to be most of the weight loss. You can lose a ton of weight sitting on the couch. But in terms of, for a physique sport, you can lose the body fat through just diet and exercise. You don't need to add in the cardio. But I am a big advocate of cardio because I think part of this is we should be healthy, we should feel good, not just look good. And I do feel that cardio helps with that. So in terms of how I program cardio, in season or off season, usually it's at least 3 times a week. I generally try and say at least about 20 minutes. I like to do different things. I hate running, so I like to run. Running is always miserable for me. It's always exhausting for me. I feel like, I don't know, I used to run when I was younger. I never really loved it, but I didn't feel like I was bad at it. And being over 200 pounds, like here and there when I've been under 200 pounds, it didn't seem as bad, but over 200 pounds, it just seems brutal for me. But so I feel like I'm compelled to always include it into my own programs because of the, I guess, just mental toughness element of how much I hate running. But I do enjoy rowing. I enjoy doing like the air bike. And then more than anything, I think I like doing circuit training. I love, especially if you incorporate like sprints and rowing and ski ergometer and all these other things like into a weightlifting circuit, I think that's definitely the most fun. So that way you're kind of active recovery, you're keeping your heart rate up, but you're not necessarily always taxing the muscle. So that's probably my preferred way to get my cardio in, because it is a little bit more taxing on the body. I'll only do that usually 1, maybe 2 times a week, and then the rest of it is running, rowing, biking, stuff like that. So anyway, for real, that is that on my I guess my basics of my training philosophies. I don't know if I'm going to go more into this or not, but I thought it'd be fun to share.